I was in Egypt during the Second Revolution. I was in my hotel only a few blocks away from Tahrir Square when I got word that several journalists were being raided and arrested and news stations were being shut down. It later turned out that anyone who supported, my understanding is it's been a while, but it was something having to do with the state cracking down on Islam and going after the Muslim Brotherhood. So it was mostly, it was like Al Jazeera, Arabic, I think, that got shut down, and some local stations that were supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. And the reason, and again, this is like, it's been a while since I was there, and we went over the story and the details, but it was that they removed a Muslim Brotherhood, president or whatever, and they wanted a more secular leader, so it was a big crisis. Long story short, let me tell you how scary it is when you're in a foreign country. You have no guaranteed protection. In fact, you may be targeted as a journalist, and you get word that they have raided news stations and arrested journalists. So yes, I took many precautions to pack up my things and get ready. I don't carry a lot, but I was like, okay, they may be raiding journalists. I'm here with the crew. We're filming. We're doing live stuff. We're interviewing everybody, and it might come to us because we don't know why the journalists are getting arrested. So packed up my stuff, made my room look spotless like I wasn't in it, went downstairs and just kind of like hung out in the lobby. And then we got word that it was only these select stations. But that's scary. It is scary. And it's something you have to deal with when you're reporting in foreign conflict, especially in a revolution. But the reason I bring this up is because the comfy, cushy American journalists who sit in rooms all day, like I do here, for some reason, have lowered the U.S. press freedom ranking because they're scared of Trump. Oh heavens! Trump said a mean thing about the press, and that makes a climate of fear for journalists. My God. This is just the absolute most absurd thing. I couldn't believe this when I saw it. This from a few days ago, and I pulled up the actual press freedom ranking. Trump exacerbates press freedom's steady decline. Aw, was the president mean to you? Please. In Turkey, they arrest more journalists than any other country, and I've reported from there. Thailand has lèse-majesté laws. When I was producing a documentary about the conflict in Thailand, we had to go back to the drawing board several times to revise voiceover because we were warned if we produce this with the way we framed things, first, they will block the documentary in the country, and potentially, you will never be allowed to go back. So we had to try and frame things. Check this out. There were people in Thailand who were critical of the royal family. We could not show what they were saying. We had to mention they were critical and then give a very tepid statement lest we get in trouble and get shut down. It was particularly dangerous because we had people and sources in the country who could be imprisoned for violating this rule. So we were tasked with trying to figure out how to convey the ideas that these people had without getting them arrested, without getting other sources arrested, and without getting the other journalists we still had on the ground kicked out of the country or arrested. Let me tell you about press freedom, okay? When I've been in countries that don't have the level of protections they do in the U.S., where I've been surrounded by men screaming at me in Ukrainian, and I have no idea what's going on, and we get lucky enough to get pulled out by one guy walks up, breaks it up. People I know in Egypt got fire. They were shooting at him with birdshot from these homemade pistols. And yes, let me tell you about actual press fears, like covering crime. Covering various crime beats. I went around Chicago with a crime reporter, a local reporter, and we saw several murders in one night. You want to talk about a climate of fear? Yet, what we're learning now is that because the president has said mean things about the press, there's a climate of fear, and it's reduced our global score. Let's read this. U.S. press freedom enshrined in the First... Okay, hold on. Not only that, we have a First Amendment. Come on. Like, how many countries don't have free speech and free press protections? Many of them, okay? U.S. press freedom enshrined in the First Amendment to the 1787 Constitution has been under increasing attack over the past few years, and the first year of President Donald J. Trump's presidency has fostered further decline in journalists' right to report. He has declared the press an enemy of the American people in a series of verbal attacks towards journalists, attempted to block White House access to multiple media outlets, and routinely uses the term fake news in retaliation for critical reporting. One guy One guy, he's the president, for sure. It's a very, very powerful position. Not only that, Trump's a billionaire. I get it. But why should we consider Trump being mean a threat to press freedoms? If the White House doesn't want someone in their press conference, that is their decision. And more importantly, they're under no obligation to have press events. So you have to consider that. I don't like the idea of a government, of an authority figure, not putting on press events, not talking to the American people. But think about how the world used to be before the internet and before television. You didn't know what they were doing half the time anyway, unless you were lucky enough to get a newspaper and it said last week they did this, and you're like, oh wow. So today, with the rapid expansion of technologies, we've seen a wave of fake news. It's true. We've seen crap reporting. You know, it's really funny that the Reporters Without Borders for Freedom of Information, the press index, they're like, oh no, the U.S. ranking has gone down. We're 45. Their global score is actually up, I guess. Ranking since 2013. Let me show you this story right here. The top 10 things the media got wrong about collusion and obstruction. And the New York Post goes through a bunch of different stories. I might save this for later, but I want to highlight this just to point out. When Trump sees a fake news story and calls it such, they immediately say he's calling all journalists everywhere the fake news. Now, Trump has criticized organizations as a whole, and that I understand. But Trump can be hyperbolic. He's a person, and sometimes you get hyperbolic people. Let's read a little bit more. In retaliation, he has even called for revoking certain media outlets' broadcasting licenses. And sure, I think he's wrong to do it, but we have a constitution, and he can't. He literally can't. It would be like, old man yells at cloud. You know that meme of Abe Simpson? Who cares? The violent anti-press rhetoric from the highest level. Oh my God, this is just so stupid. The violence. As someone who has actually had bullets aimed at me, and in more than one occasion, let me tell you about violence. How about when I was in Ferguson and Mr. Don Lemon of CNN reported there was no tear gas while I was currently inhaling tear gas and almost passed out, okay? I was in Ferguson and we got fired at. Someone was firing some kind of gun at us, toof, 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 toof. And it's on YouTube. You can go and watch this. It's a Ferguson highlights. I believe it's start watching from minute 8 or something. We drop down and you hear gunshots. And then the police are like, go, go, go. I run, jump a fence the whole time, inhaling tear gas. And then you can actually hear me wheezing where I'm like, I can't breathe because I don't know how I don't know how the lungs work entirely. I'm not a doctor or a medic or anything. But my understanding is that I completely displaced the oxygen by rapidly inhaling in a cloud of tear gas. And so then I started getting tunnel vision, like when you're about to pass out. And then I fell down on the ground and some kid walked out and splashed water on my face, triggering the gasp reflex. Let me tell you about violence and the press, okay? These things are real. And you want to talk about covering violent riots and things like that, but then claim that Trump being mean to you is violent anti-press rhetoric. Good God. Journalists in this country are whiny babies. Not all of them. Because I know a lot of badass journalists who are like, these people are whiny babies too. And there are people who are willing to, jump full speed into a conflict zone. And I've seen some pretty badass reporting from other people who are still at Vice today. Vice News has actually got some people on the ground doing some pretty hardcore stuff. But most of these journalists who complain are like beat reporters who sit in an office all day and then are like, oh, the president said what about us? Oh, we're losing our press freedoms. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll see you in Turkey when you get locked up in a Turkish prison. They say, the violent anti-press rhetoric from the highest levels of the U.S. government has been coupled with an increase in the number of press freedom violations at the local level as journalists run the risk of arrest for covering protest or simply attempting to ask public officials questions. Reporters have even been subject to physical assault while on the job. It appears the Trump effect has only amplified the disappointing press freedom climate that predated his presidency. Whistleblowers face prosecution under the Espionage Act if they leak information of public interest to the press. While there is still no federal shield law guaranteeing reporters' right to protect their sources, journalists and their devices continue to be searched at the U.S. border, while some foreign journalists are still denied entry into the U.S. after covering sensitive topics like Colombia's FARC or Kurdistan. Yes, I was detained on the way back. I think it was from Turkey. I was stopped and searched, and they did a swabbing, and they asked me a bunch of questions, and some of the questions were really silly, because when it comes to actual security, you'd be surprised. They want to try and catch you off guard with a question that seems to make no sense. And they do this because they want to stop anyone who's got a pre-scripted set of answers. Like, if they ask you what you're doing in the U.S., what do you say? Oh, I'm here to go visit a friend in New York. So what they'll do is they'll throw something completely random at you. And I don't know exactly what it was specifically, but I think it was something to the effect of, like, the guy said, what's your favorite baseball team? Just randomly, just like, he was like, so where are you coming from? And I was like, Istanbul. We were doing an interview with a refugee. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, how long were you out there? And I was like, I think it was like 5 days. And he goes, oh, okay, and then what's your favorite baseball team? And I laughed, and I was like, look, man, I'm a skateboarder. I'm not a baseball guy. And he's like, all right. They asked me a few more questions. I actually got held for like 10 or 15 minutes, but it was really chill. It wasn't like in a secret room or anything. They just had me pulled off to like a special little seating area. And that's the thing that kind of happens. And I don't feel offended by that. I don't. You know, my passport's got a ton of countries in it, and many of them are conflict zones. So naturally, they're going to see that and be like, okay, this guy's got Egypt, Morocco, Ukraine, Venezuela. Let's talk to this guy. All right, let's see what he's on. And just got back from Turkey. And so, journalist, you know, I work for a company, so they send me out to all these places. And he's like, oh, okay. And that was basically the end of it. While I will recognize there have been some high-profile incidents that are disconcerting in terms of people getting arrested, whistleblowers getting prosecuted and stuff, a lot of that happened under Obama. Obama prosecuted more whistleblowers than all their presidents combined. So it's now. It's like, oh, okay, now because Trump is mean, we're going to see the rankings go down. You did have one moment I'm going to point out where there was some Republican guy, I think it was like Montana or something, I can't remember, where he actually like body slammed a reporter to the ground because the reporter was asking questions, pissed him off. And then you actually had an instance where Trump at a rally was laughing about it and was like, yeah, you know, like making fun of the journalists. That I can understand, you know, violent. But when you talk about most of this, further decline in journalists' right to report, that's absolutely absurd. America is one of the safest and easiest places to report from, and that's why we have so many lazy journalists who face no risk and get overpaid for what they do. I'll leave it there. Because actually, let's do this. Let's go back and take a look at their actual ranking system. Here's one I can believe. Russia. Kind of sucks. But look at this. Let me point something out. Sweden is ranked 3. I actually felt substantially less safe in Sweden than I did in the U.S. And that may be because of the sensitive topic I was reporting on. Look at it. China is black. Oh, good Lord. And look at this. Egypt, too. Yes, Egypt. Let me tell you about what's scary. And I should clarify too. I get it. Not every country is perfect, and we understand these countries are substantially worse than our country. In Sweden, we had a guy spying on us. Like, come on, man. I know it. I've been doing this a long time. I've been to really dangerous countries, and I think it's hilarious that they rate Sweden higher than here because. But you know what? Maybe that's fair to point out because Sweden's culture is more self-policing, I guess, self-censoring. Because the media itself will come to your house and dox you and harass you for your comments and things like that. Whereas there's more of a concern, I suppose, here because President Trump is mean to people. But please. President Trump was mean to me, therefore the press freedom's got to go down. No. America should be like, I'll put it this way, I guess. I guess the ranking that the U.S. has doesn't mean it's bad here. It just means it's worse than many other countries, which I could say is fair. But below Romania, like, come on, below Botswana and the Czech Republic, kind of feel like that's not the case. And even the UK, I'm going to have to say that's not the case. People are getting arrested in the UK for things they're saying on the internet. How is it worse here in the US? Oh, I'm sorry, our president was mean. Yeah, okay, whatever. I got another video coming up for you at 4 p.m. Stick around. I will see you then. That's going to be at youtube.com/timcast. Different channel.